My name is Samantha, and I'm a typical American kid from a middle-class family. You might think that sounds nice, right? A house, a steady job, trips to Disney for vacation, sounds perfect. But trust me, sometimes the problems of a middle-class family aren't any less than those of the super rich. Especially when you're living in the middle of it all, but you always feel like a ghost, breathing the same air, yet nobody really sees you. I'm the middle child, sandwiched between my older brother Jason and my younger sister Lillian. I'm basically a textbook case of middle child syndrome. To be honest, for me, it's not just a syndrome, it's my destiny. Jason, he was our family's golden boy from the start. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a great smile, good grades, and a star athlete. He was the perfect kid in my parents' eyes. From the day he started preschool, my parents were always talking about how Jason was going to go to an Ivy League school, inherit the family business, and bring glory to our name. He was the one with all the expectations, the one everyone focused on. Do you know that feeling? The feeling that you live under the same roof, do the same things, and even work harder, but you'll always just be the supporting character? I remember when Jason was in 5th grade, he won the district science fair and got this huge trophy. The whole family was ecstatic. My parents took him to the fanciest steakhouse to celebrate, and when we got home, they put the trophy in the most visible spot in the living room, showing it off to anyone who came over. What about me? In the same year, I won first place in a citywide writing competition. That certificate is still tucked away in one of my old books, never framed, and it probably doesn't even exist in my parents' memories. When I nervously showed them the certificate, my mom just glanced at it and said, "Oh, Samantha, you're a good writer, too." Then she immediately turned to Jason and asked what socks he was going to wear for his baseball game next week. In that moment, I felt like my hard work, my talent, my very existence, was as insignificant as air. Then there's Lillian. My little sister is a vibrant little sprite, with an innate charm that's just impossible to resist. She could sing, dance, and paint, and at every family gathering, she'd have all the adults laughing their heads off. My parents doted on her like she was a delicate porcelain doll. Whatever she wanted, she got. Lillian wanted ballet shoes. They were hers in less than half an hour. She wanted to learn how to paint. My parents immediately found her the best teacher in the city for 2 private lessons a week. As for me, I wanted an encyclopedia about space, and I had to get straight A's on my final exams and wait for months, hoping I might get it for Christmas. That kind of contrast wasn't a one-time thing, it was a constant, year after year. This feeling of being overlooked followed me as I grew up, like a shadow. I learned to observe quietly, to think for myself, and to hide. This isn't out of weakness, but as a form of self-preservation and a quiet accumulation of strength. I watched them pour all their love and expectations into Jason and Lillian, and I watched them celebrate every small achievement. Meanwhile, I quietly finished my schoolwork, quietly pursued my interests, and quietly built my own world. This quietness made it even easier for them to ignore me because I never caused trouble, never asked for anything, and never made a sound. They assumed I didn't need anything, but the truth is, I just knew they wouldn't see me no matter how much I needed them. This pain of being ignored, like a constant tide, washed over me day after day, making me tougher, but also more detached. So when Jason announced he was getting married, and his fiancée was Chloe, the daughter of a local, long-established manufacturing company called Glory Industries, my feelings were pretty complicated. Chloe's family was wealthy, but Glory Industries had been struggling in recent years. Their stock had plummeted, and there were even rumors they were on the brink of bankruptcy. Still, Chloe and her family carried themselves with that high society arrogance, always looking down their noses at everyone. She seemed to think marrying Jason was a huge favor to our family, as if we were getting a free pass to sink along with their Titanic, and that it was an honor. I hadn't interacted with her much, but I knew she was a typical rich girl who loved designer brands and had a condescending tone, as if the world owed her an apology. In my presence, she always had this dismissive superiority, looking at me like I was an insignificant tree in the background. The wedding invitation arrived on the eve of the big day. To be honest, I hadn't expected much. For our family, these big occasions usually meant I'd be assigned some unimportant role, like helping watch the kids or being silent scenery in the background. But when I held the invitation, I couldn't help but look at it. The envelope was embossed with gold, the paper was thick, everything was so exquisite, it was a work of art. But when I opened it, I froze. There was no seat number. I thought it must be an oversight. After all, it was Jason's wedding, they wouldn't forget about me. Maybe they wanted to surprise me, or maybe there was a special arrangement. I even picked out a new dress for the occasion, a lake blue one with a few sequins. I wanted to look presentable, to at least not embarrass Jason, and I hoped that maybe this time I could truly sit in the banquet hall as a member of the family and be seen. I even went and had my hair done and put on some makeup, holding on to a tiny spark of hope that they would look at me, even just to give me a smile. But that morning, as I walked into the wedding venue in my carefully chosen lake blue dress, with my makeup on and a mix of anxiety and hope, reality slapped me hard in the face. At the entrance to the banquet hall, a tuxedo-clad master of ceremonies politely stopped me. His smile was flawless, but his eyes held a kind of formal distance. "Hello, Miss Samantha, is that right?" he asked, his voice perfectly modulated, not too high, not too low. "Yes, it is," I said with a smile, a little nervous, wondering where he would take me. "To the main table near the stage, or to the family seating?" "This way, please." He gestured, not toward the brilliantly lit and flower-decked banquet hall, but toward a side door next to it. I was a little confused but followed him anyway. We walked down a dark hallway, and the air, which had been fragrant with flowers, was now filled with the strong smell of food, the roar of a dishwasher, and the clatter of silverware. My heart sank, and a sense of foreboding washed over me. He led me into a semi-open area. The lighting was dim, a stark contrast to the luxurious banquet hall outside. Next to me were huge stainless steel counters where chefs in white uniforms were busy chopping and cooking, the steam blurring my vision. Waiters rushed back and forth with trays, each with a look of busy on their faces. They didn't even look at me, as if I were just an extra piece of furniture in the kitchen. In one corner, a small table was temporarily set up with an ordinary white cloth, a world away from the lavish tablecloths in the banquet hall, and it looked completely out of place. On the table was a single set of cutlery, lonely, as if waiting for a forgotten guest. "Miss Samantha," the MC said, pointing to the small table, his face still holding that impeccable smile. "It's quiet here, and you can take care of your own needs." His phrase "take care of your own needs" sounded like concern but was delivered with a tone of undeniable command, as if I should be grateful for their thoughtfulness. "Take care of my needs?" I mumbled, my mind blank. My eyes swept over the busy chefs and waiters. They didn't even spare me a glance, as if I were a ghost in the kitchen. I felt like a transparent person, or rather, like an old object thrown into a storage closet. I could hear the bursts of laughter from the banquet hall, the MC's booming voice, the toasts rising and falling, the music and applause all mixed together. The sound was so clear, yet so distant, as if separated by an invisible wall. My heart felt like it had been doused in ice water and then squeezed tight. Quiet. Take care of my needs? This was clearly them throwing me into a corner to get me out of sight. I wasn't a guest, I wasn't even an invited family member. I was just an unobtrusive presence. My careful preparations, my tiny glimmer of hope, were all instantly torn to shreds by this cold reality. I quietly sat down, without arguing or getting angry. That feeling of powerlessness and humiliation instantly overwhelmed me. This humiliation was all too familiar. It had been this way my whole life, hadn't it? Quietly accepting, quietly enduring. I fought back tears, picked up my phone, and pretended to be looking at messages, though I couldn't see a thing on the screen. My fingers traced the cold glass, trying to calm the repressed anger and pain in my chest. My cheeks felt hot, as if I'd been slapped. I lowered my head, trying to use the phone screen to hide the tears that were about to fall and the heart that had been trampled into 1,000 pieces. The kitchen was filled with noise, the clatter of pots and pans, the shouting of chefs, the hurried footsteps of waiters, but none of it could drown out the whispers that came from behind me, like cold needles piercing my heart. "Is that the groom's sister? My God, she looks so pathetic," a young waiter said in a low voice to a coworker, his tone a mix of excited gossip and fake sympathy. "I know, right?" an older woman agreed as she wiped a plate. "I heard she's always been overlooked by her family, and the bride's side looks down on her, too. Look, they even put her in the kitchen. It's too much." She shook her head, seemingly pitying me, but her pity was mostly just the thrill of a good show. The bride even gave specific instructions, another voice chimed in, with a hint of schadenfreude. Miss Chloe said not to let her get in the way of the important guests. She said the girl is too quiet, and she'd make the important people uncomfortable. She emphasized the words "get in the way of the important guests" as if to remind me that I was the unobtrusive person who didn't belong in polite company. In that moment, all my pain, all my anger, and all the memories of being ignored and belittled brewed and churned in my chest like a volcano. It wasn't just ice water anymore, it was molten rock, boiling hot and ready to erupt. They thought I was just a harmless sister, a marginalized family member who could be placed anywhere and belittled at will. They thought I was still the same Samantha who would just silently endure it all. They had reduced my existence to nothing, not even allowing me to breathe the same air or occupy the same space. They were so wrong. I gripped my phone tightly, my knuckles white. They had no idea what I had gone through in the past few years or who I had become. They had no idea that I was no longer the little girl who needed to be seen and needed their attention to survive. That quiet, transparent, harmless Samantha had died a long time ago. In her place was a Samantha who had learned to bide her time, to wait, and to fight back. A Samantha who no longer craved love but simply craved fairness and respect. This humiliation, this public contempt, completely ignited the long-dormant flame deep inside me. I looked up, and through the kitchen's glass window, I could see a corner of the banquet hall. Jason and Chloe were going from table to table, toasting, their faces beaming with happiness. Chloe, in her wedding dress, was like a noble princess, surrounded by everyone, and Jason, my brother, had a look of pride and satisfaction on his face. They were the center of attention, and I, like an abandoned Cinderella, was sitting in the corner of a kitchen, smelling the grease and listening to their grating laughter. But I'm not Cinderella, and I don't need a prince to save me. I knew with crystal clarity that this humiliation was the final straw. This would be a turning point. They put me in the kitchen to humiliate me, but they never imagined that the small table would be the stage from which I would tear apart their future. I wasn't a victim, I was a master. Deep inside me, a plan, a bold and thorough plan, began to form. I calmly watched the joyous crowd through the window, but my eyes had never been so firm and cold. They were about to find out they had messed with the wrong person. They were about to learn how terrifying a neglected outsider could be when they unleash their hidden power. This day was their doomsday. They would pay a heavy price for today, and for everything they had ever done to me. You ask where I went after college? That's an interesting story. You probably think I should have just followed in Jason's footsteps and joined the family business, or pursued some artistic dream like Lillian. After all, in their eyes, I was supposed to be the kind of person who followed the rules, or rather, had no ideas of my own. But you know what? When a person is ignored for a long time, she grows her own strength in the dark. I didn't choose the path they laid out for me, or, more accurately, nobody laid a path out for me in the first place. I chose to start my own business. That's right, Samantha, the transparent person in the family, chose to venture out into a brand new world. I entered a new tech field. At the time, AI and big data weren't the hot topics they are today. Many people thought it was all just science fiction. But I saw its potential, especially in the digital transformation of traditional manufacturing. I felt it was an untapped market. My company, Spark Innovations, doesn't that sound a little ambitious? Like a single spark that can start a wildfire. The beginning was rough. I didn't have my parents' financial support or Jason's prominent connections. I took the money I had saved from my college part-time jobs and scholarships, rented a tiny office with just one desk, an old computer, and a whole lot of guts. I remember in the beginning, I practically lived in that office. Working until 2 or 3 in the morning was normal, and when I got tired, I'd just nap on the desk. When I was hungry, I'd eat the cheapest instant noodles. Once, my mom called to ask how I was, and I told her I was starting a business. Her tone was clearly dismissive. "Oh, Samantha, starting a business, that's not easy. Don't work yourself too hard. If it doesn't work out, you can always come back home and find some random job." She never asked me what I was doing or what I needed. She just saw me as a kid playing around, someone who would eventually hit a wall and obediently return to the safe zone they had imagined for me. Jason was even more direct. At one family dinner, he said half-jokingly, "Samantha, don't bother with all that tech stuff. What's the point of all that? You should spend more time learning to paint with Lillian. It's a much better way to cultivate your character." The contempt in his voice made me want to crush the glass I was holding. But I didn't argue. I just smiled. Because I knew words were pointless, only facts could shut them up. In the first few years, I recruited a group of like-minded young engineers. Like me, they were passionate about transforming traditional industries. We worked like madmen on research and development. On countless weekends and late nights, we were in the lab, debugging code and testing models. We hit countless bottlenecks, product development wasn't going well, and our funding almost ran out. At one point, I had to sell a piece of jewelry my grandmother left me just to get through the toughest period. But we never gave up. We believed in our technology and in our ability to change things. Finally, in the past 5 years, Spark Innovations grew rapidly, like a real spark. We weren't a publicly traded company yet, but we had a name for ourselves in the industry. We had a whole suite of core technologies and several patents, especially in the area of manufacturing digital transformation. Our products and solutions helped old-fashioned factories implement intelligent and automated production lines, significantly increasing efficiency and lowering costs. We weren't a company that just told a good story and packaged a concept, we were truly solving problems with technology. We landed some big-name clients, and our reputation grew. I knew that while our company was small, we had something that was incredibly scarce and valuable in this day and age: real innovation and disruptive technology. My team and my technology were my confidence, and my weapon. You might be asking why my family didn't know about my success. That's my deepest secret and the opportunity I've been waiting for. A few months ago, a bombshell piece of news spread through the industry. Chloe's family's manufacturing company, Glory Industries, was facing a technological bottleneck and shrinking market share. Their family business, once the pride of the area with a long history, had failed to keep up with the times, like so many stagnant traditional businesses. Their products were outdated, production lines were inefficient, and their market share was being eaten up by newer companies. They were in desperate need of a digital transformation, and they were trying anything and everything. There were even rumors that if they didn't find a breakthrough soon, they might not make it through the next year. So they put out a public call for bids, looking for a technology partner and hoping for a resurrection through a new technology plan. When the news came out, I was a little shaken. I immediately realized this was an opportunity, a chance to connect with Glory Industries. Of course, they had no idea that the CEO of the company that could save them, Spark Innovations, was the same person they looked down on, Samantha. I participated in the bidding process under the name Spark Innovations. The competition was fierce. Several large tech companies with deep pockets and strong backgrounds also participated. But Spark Innovations won the bid with our leading technology solution and a highly competitive price. Our technical advantages were real, and what we could bring them was a genuine transformation. Chloe's father, Robert Sterling, my future father-in-law, was very pleased. He even personally called my company's project manager, his voice filled with barely concealed excitement and urgency, calling it the only hope for Glory Industries' revival. He didn't know that the project manager on the other end of the line was acting on my instructions every step of the way, and that every detail of the project proposal was personally approved by me. They had no idea that the CEO of Spark Innovations was Samantha, the person they looked down on. Throughout the entire bidding and negotiation process, I remained anonymous. All my external communications were handled by my team or through an alias. I even deliberately lowered my voice to make it sound more steady and less like a young woman's. They probably assumed I was some tech geek behind the scenes, or a big boss who couldn't be bothered to show his face. After all, in their deeply ingrained beliefs, how could a woman like me start such a powerful tech company? It was probably unimaginable to them. You might ask why I kept this from my family. The reasons are numerous and complex. For one, as I said before, I wanted to prove myself on my own merit. I didn't want them to think differently of me just because I was Jason's sister or Lillian's sister. I wanted them to know that Samantha Jones was just Samantha Jones, that she had her own value and her own abilities, and that she didn't need to depend on any family glory. I yearned for respect, and that respect had to be something I earned myself. On the other hand, I also wanted to see if they would still remember me or show me an ounce of respect without my status. It might sound a little messed up, but I genuinely wanted to know. I had imagined countless times that if they ever discovered my accomplishments, would they see me in a new light? Would they feel even a little bit of regret for having ignored me? Would they come to me on their own, even just to say you're amazing? I kept waiting for them to discover me, to acknowledge me. But it turns out my expectations were a joke. They remained the same, as if I was meant to live in the shadows. A deeper reason was that I always had a premonition, or a subconscious defense mechanism. My whole life, they had taught me not to fully trust them or to have high expectations. This feeling of being unimportant made me very cautious in my relationships, especially with my family. I needed a trump card that could protect me when I was hurt. So, before signing the formal contract, I specifically had my legal team make some very clever adjustments to the contract terms. We added a few clauses that seemed insignificant but were actually full of hidden implications. These clauses ensured that under certain circumstances, such as the other party engaging in any form of unprofessional conduct, moral failings, or reputational damage, I could terminate the partnership at any time without any liability for breach of contract. My legal team was very surprised and asked me why I would want such harsh terms. I just calmly said, it's always good to be prepared for the worst. In business partnerships, you need to have a backup plan. They didn't know that my real worst-case scenario wasn't a business risk, it was the dark side of human nature and the long-repressed nerve ready to snap. This contract was my trump card, my ace, my lifeline, and also their death warrant. It wasn't lying in a company safe or in a law firm's files. It was in my handbag, heavy like a cold stone. I made a point of putting it in there before coming to Jason's wedding today. I didn't know what was going to happen today, but I knew I was prepared for the worst and ready to fight back at any moment. My heart was beating slowly, but strongly. I was no longer the Samantha who would silently endure. I was a Samantha holding a trump card. And that trump card was about to be revealed right in front of them by me. They were about to find out that I wasn't someone who could be humiliated at will. I would make them pay a price far more painful than bankruptcy for their arrogance and disrespect. A mechanical pencil, you know the feeling? The lead is thin, and it's fine for everyday use, but if you press too hard, it'll break. I feel like I've been the lead of that pencil my whole life, constantly trying to stay straight and not break. But today, at Jason and Chloe's wedding, I felt like I had finally reached that limit, that breaking point. After the ceremony, all the fake pleasantries and long, boring speeches were finally over. Then came the reception. That's the main event. For people in high society, what you eat isn't important. What's important is who you see, who you talk to, and showing off how glamorous you are. I sat in my little corner of the kitchen, like a forgotten ghost. I listened to the laughter from the banquet hall, the clinking of silverware on china, and smelled the tempting food, but I had no appetite. I just calmly stared at my phone. There was nothing on the screen. I wasn't even focusing. I was just staring blankly. In my mind, I kept replaying the whispered gossip from the waitstaff, that phrase so as not to get in the way of the important guests seared into my heart. I felt a fire burning in my chest, making it hard to breathe. But I forced myself to calm down because I knew the real moment hadn't arrived yet. Jason and Chloe started making their rounds, toasting each table. They were the center of attention, the stars of this grand performance. Chloe wore a wedding dress said to be worth a fortune, and her train trailed behind her. With every step, she had the air of a winner. She smiled with such confidence and pride, as if the whole world should applaud her happiness today. Jason was by her side, also beaming, with the self-satisfied look of a winner in life. As they walked past, they were met with flattery and well wishes. As Chloe toasted, she didn't forget to boast about her family's glory. I heard her tell a high society lady, Glory Industries is about to make a big move. We're partnering with a very powerful tech company for a complete digital transformation. The future is looking bright. The tone of her voice was so smug and certain, as if Glory Industries had already been resurrected. I listened and sneered to myself. A big move? A bright future? That depends on who's in charge. When they got to the kitchen entrance, the noise from the banquet hall seemed to quiet down a bit. I felt their eyes sweep over to my corner. My heart skipped a beat. Is it finally happening? Chloe was the first to see me. Her smile faltered for a moment, then she put on that same dismissive, professional smile. She just glanced at me, as if I were an irrelevant part of the background. "Oh, Samantha, you're here." Her voice was soft, but there was an almost imperceptible contempt in it. "It's nice here. Don't let us disturb your meal." She didn't even come over, just said that from a distance, as if dismissing an annoying stranger. There was no warmth in her eyes, no newlywed joy, just the condescending air of someone bestowing a favor. She didn't ask if I was comfortable or if I needed anything, as if my being here was what I deserved. Jason saw me, too. His smile also faded a little, replaced by a slightly awkward expression. He just gave a stiff nod, didn't say another word, and didn't come over. He didn't even look me in the eye. He avoided my gaze, as if I was an embarrassing presence. My own brother, he would rather pretend he didn't see me than give me a basic level of respect at his own wedding, in front of his fiancée. In that moment, the rage in my heart reached its boiling point. All the patience, all the repression, and all the pain I had been holding in came rushing out like a flood, violently crashing against my sanity. I clenched my hands so tightly my nails were almost digging into my palms. "Don't disturb me while I'm eating?" What a perfect phrase. My being here was the biggest disturbance. They had thrown me into the corner of the kitchen like garbage and were now pretending to be thoughtful. Hypocrites! Disgusting! I forced myself to take a deep breath, once, twice. My body was shaking, but my mind had never been clearer. Just then, Chloe's father, Robert Sterling, the head of Glory Industries, looked preoccupied as he toasted. He wasn't the kind of person who could completely hide his emotions, especially under the influence of alcohol. He was talking in a low voice to someone next to him about Glory Industries' struggles and his high hopes for the upcoming contract with Spark Innovations. He probably thought that complaining a little and then looking forward to the future at a wedding would make him seem more human and get some sympathy. He raised his glass and said to a man who was clearly an important client, "Oh, old friend, Glory Industries has been in such a mess lately. Our market share is dropping, and we can't seem to break through this tech bottleneck. Luckily, we've been in talks with a company called Spark Innovations for a huge project to upgrade our entire production line. I hear their technology is very advanced. If we can get this contract signed, our company will be saved." There was a hint of worry in his voice, but mostly it was the helpless urgency of someone pinning all their hopes on someone else. The man next to him agreed with a few words, and then Robert Sterling started complaining again, his voice a little louder, probably because he'd had too much to drink and his guard was down. "That CEO from Spark Innovations is so difficult to deal with. Such an attitude, and the contract still hasn't been signed. I've personally called several times to rush them, but their team keeps saying the CEO is too busy. Our company is relying on this. If this project falls through, I don't know what I'll do." He even mumbled a few curses, complaining that the other party was putting on airs and didn't know their place. I heard his complaints and gave a cold smile. Difficult to deal with? An attitude? He was right. I am difficult to deal with, and I do have an attitude. Because I am Samantha Jones, not the marginalized family member who you can dismiss and look down on. They thought I was just a ghost secretly listening to their conversation, but they had no idea that the CEO of the company that could save them was sitting right under their noses. I took the thick cooperation contract out of my handbag. It lay there, quietly, carefully protected, like a bomb waiting to be detonated. I stood up slowly and deliberately, my steps steady and filled with an invisible power. My appearance instantly drew everyone's attention. The chefs and waiters in the kitchen stopped what they were doing and looked at me with curiosity. Some of the guests in the banquet hall were also drawn by my sudden actions and started whispering. I calmly walked over to Robert Sterling. He was still complaining, muttering about how that CEO was so difficult. When he saw me approach, he froze for a moment, his eyes filled with confusion, as if wondering what Jason's sister from the kitchen corner wanted. I smiled, and there was a hint of coldness in that smile and the self-assured confidence of someone in complete control. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice soft but clear enough for everyone around to hear. Are you talking about this contract? Then, I held up the document in my hand. It was a thick, beautifully bound cooperation contract. The cover clearly bore the striking logo of Spark Innovations, along with a clear line of text. Cooperation Agreement, Glory Industries and Spark Innovations. And on the signature page, my name, Samantha Jones, was clearly printed next to CEO. Robert Sterling's face instantly went white, like a piece of paper from which all the blood had been drained. His eyes were wide, and his mouth was slightly open, an expression of disbelief on his face. He trembled and said in a voice that was almost a whisper, "Samantha, that's you?" His voice was filled with shock, fear, and a hint of despair. The fat on his face was shaking, and his eyes held undisguised panic. He was probably thinking, how is this possible? How could the girl he had so easily dismissed be the CEO of Spark Innovations, the company he was so desperately trying to please? Jason and Chloe were also stunned. Their smiles had completely vanished, their faces ashen, and their shock was like being struck by lightning. Chloe's mouth was agape in an O shape, her eyes vacant, and her wedding dress looked incredibly ironic on her. Jason had a look of disbelief on his face. He looked at me, then at the contract, unable to connect the person in front of him with the transparent sister he had always known. I didn't acknowledge their shock or give them a chance to react. My eyes swept over Robert Sterling's horrified face, then to the dumbfounded Jason and Chloe, and the whispering guests. I took a deep breath, and then, in front of everyone, I slowly and deliberately tore that contract, the contract they had pinned all their hopes on, their supposed lifeline, into 100 pieces. Tear, tear, the sound of the paper ripping was incredibly clear in the bustling banquet hall, almost grating. Every tear was like a loud slap in their faces. The paper confetti fell like snow, scattering in the air, falling to the floor, and landing on the shoulders of the shocked guests. I looked at them, at their fear and despair, and inside, I felt a calm I had never known before. I spoke slowly and clearly, every word powerful, like a final judgment in a courtroom. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, this cooperation is cancelled." I paused, and my gaze returned to Robert Sterling's pale face. I just don't think a family that doesn't even know how to respect its own members deserves the help of Spark. My voice echoed in the air, filled with an unshakable finality. I dropped the last piece of paper from my hand. It fluttered to the ground, symbolizing the total collapse of Glory Industries' future. The room was dead silent, with only the sound of my heartbeat and the sound of their shattered dreams. I had completed my counterattack, and this was only the beginning. The moment I tore up the contract, the entire banquet hall was silenced and then exploded with noise. It was like watching a quiet person suddenly throw a powerful bomb into a crowd with the fuse already burning down. Tear, tear, the sound of the paper ripping was deafening in a banquet hall that had just been filled with laughter and clinking glasses. It was like a knife scratching glass. I watched the paper confetti fall like snowflakes, landing on the floor, on Robert Sterling's pale face, and on Chloe's white wedding dress. They weren't just pieces of paper, they were the shattered future of Glory Industries and their family's pride. Robert Sterling's face was a shade of purple from anger, as if he might have a stroke at any moment. He pointed at me, his mouth opening and closing a few times, trying to say something, but no words came out. He just made a gurgling sound. His hands were shaking, and his fingernails were white from gripping so hard. He'd probably never experienced such humiliation in his life, especially at his daughter's wedding, in front of his important clients and friends. Chloe burst into tears right then and there. It wasn't a quiet sob, but a desperate, angry wail. She completely gave up on her dignified image. Her tears and snot ran down her face, ruining her makeup. She pointed at me and yelled in a sharp, knife-like voice, "Samantha, you're a lunatic! What do you think you're doing?" Her voice was full of resentment, as if I had deliberately set out to ruin the most important day of her life. Jason rushed over, his face a mix of shock, anger, and deep embarrassment. He had probably never imagined that his transparent sister would do something so earth-shattering at his wedding. He tried to grab my arm, probably to drag me away or stop me from causing any more damage. "Samantha! Stop it! Are you crazy?" he roared, with a kind of hysterical anger I had never heard from him before. I just gave him a cold, warning look, which stopped him in his tracks. His outstretched hand froze in midair and then fell back to his side. He was taken aback by my demeanor. He had never seen me like this before. He had always thought of me as the little sister he could order around and ignore. But now, I stood before him like an unmovable mountain, radiating a power he had never felt. My parents, who had been sitting at the main table, were also completely stunned. My mom covered her mouth, her eyes filled with tears, not for me, but because the whole scene was so shocking and shameful for them. My dad's face was also dark. He was gripping the tablecloth so tightly his knuckles were white. They couldn't believe that this calm, powerful woman, this woman who could publicly tear up a multi-million-dollar contract, was the daughter they had always overlooked. They looked at me, their eyes filled with a look of strangeness and a hint of fear. They finally realized that I wasn't just Samantha. I was also the CEO of Spark Innovations, an individual they had never known and never valued. And the guests? They erupted. Whispers started up everywhere, like a tidal wave. My God, what just happened? Is that the groom's sister? What did she tear up? It looks like the Glory Industries cooperation contract. I heard Robert Sterling complaining just now that it was the company's lifeline. My goodness, is this something out of a movie? Family drama at a wedding? Flashes started going off, and cell phone cameras were all pointed at me. I knew this scene would be recorded and spread as fast as possible. But I didn't care. In fact, I welcomed it. I wanted everyone to see and know that Samantha Jones was not to be trifled with. Soon, the news about the bride's sister tearing up a major contract at the wedding spread like wildfire on social media and in the media. Along with the news were various rumors. The groom's family had been neglecting their daughter for years, the bride's family was arrogant and rude. Some guests even recorded videos of me tearing the contract, and those videos were shared wildly on social media with sensational headlines. The next day, all the major social media platforms and news headlines were dominated by the story. My name, Samantha Jones, appeared in the public eye in a dramatic way for the first time. Wedding chaos, the bride's sister tears up a multi-million-dollar contract. Glory Industries' lifeline contract destroyed, and the CEO is the groom's sister. Family feud explodes, the scorned outsider fights back. The headlines were more shocking than the last, and the photos and videos of me tearing the contract instantly set off a storm of public opinion. Glory Industries' stock plummeted, almost in a freefall. The already shaky company, having lost its only lifeline in Spark Innovations, and with the scandal of the CEO publicly tearing up the contract, faced an unprecedented crisis of trust. Their stock was in a freefall, and countless investors lost a fortune. Angry condemnations came from all sides. The company's reputation was in shambles, suppliers started to stop shipments, banks tightened their loans, and even some potential deals were cancelled. Their future was grim. My parents and Jason were truly in a panic now. The video of me tearing the contract had gone viral in our family group chat. The relatives who had been distant before were now looking at me like I was a monster. My phone started blowing up with calls and texts from them, a barrage of frantic messages. My mom's voice was tearful. Samantha, do you know what you've done? Jason's wedding is completely ruined. Robert is in the hospital from the shock. The company is going bankrupt. What were you thinking? My dad's tone was full of authority and command. Samantha, you need to explain yourself immediately. What's going on? Go apologize to Mr. Sterling and see if there's any way to fix this. And Jason? He sent a pathetic, long text filled with apologies, pleas, and even offers of anything I wanted. Samantha, I know we weren't good to you before. I was wrong, I was really wrong. But please, for the sake of our family, don't do this. The company really can't survive without Spark Innovations. What do you want? I'll give you anything. They finally realized that I wasn't just their daughter or sister, I was a business partner they couldn't afford to offend. The transparent person they had so easily put in the kitchen had transformed into the key person who could decide the fate of their family business. They finally experienced the fear of being dominated by power. What had they thought I was before? A docile puppet? A pawn to be sacrificed at any time? Now, this puppet had its own mind, and this pawn had become a queen who could flip the board over. I didn't answer any calls or reply to any texts. I just released a concise statement through my legal team. The statement was sent to all the major media outlets and shared in the business circles that were following the matter. The statement clearly said, Spark Innovations has always upheld the principles of professionalism, integrity, and mutual respect in its partnerships. We will not enter into a partnership with any company that lacks basic respect and integrity, nor will we condone any form of moral failing. This statement was undoubtedly another nail in Glory Industries' coffin. It told everyone that tearing up the contract wasn't a rash decision but a thoughtful one, and I had good reason for it. It also showed the world that Spark Innovations was a company with principles and a bottom line. This stance actually earned Spark Innovations more respect and trust. Glory Industries ultimately failed to find a replacement partner. Under the double blow of the public storm and the crisis of trust, they declared bankruptcy. The former Glory was now a total joke. Chloe and Jason's marriage was also clouded by the events. Chloe's family blamed Jason for everything, believing he was the one who had provoked me, leading to the company's bankruptcy. Her parents even accused him to his face of being unable to handle his own sister, let alone reviving a family business. Jason was stuck between his family and his wife's family. The former golden boy became depressed and lost all his ambition. His once proud future was shattered by my own hands. I heard he often drank alone, and his former confidence was gone. He finally tasted what it was like to be mercilessly cast aside by fate. And this was just the beginning. I sat on the sidelines and watched the end of this drama. I didn't feel any satisfaction, just a sense of peaceful relief. This was the price they paid for everything they had done to me. After I tore up the contract, my life hit the accelerator and changed in ways I never could have imagined. I used to live in the shadow of my family, like a ghost, unknown and unheard. Now, I'm in the spotlight, a media sensation and a legend in the business world. My company, Spark Innovations, became famous because of the incident. You might think that publicly tearing up a contract would damage a company's reputation. But the opposite happened. My determination and adherence to principles earned me widespread praise in the industry. Many companies, especially those struggling with traditional business models and eager to transform, but who were also wary of a partner's integrity, came to us seeking partnerships. They saw not only the technical prowess of Spark Innovations but also our commitment to business ethics and personal dignity. They felt that a partnership with a company like ours was a safe bet. My inbox was filled with partnership inquiries from all over the world, and my calendar for conference calls was booked months in advance. We got more orders than ever before, and our company's valuation skyrocketed. We quickly moved to a larger office and hired more talented people. I was no longer the CEO who had to handle every little thing myself. I had a more complete team that took care of a lot of the day-to-day work, allowing me to focus on the company's strategy and core technology research and development. My career reached a new peak. I became a hot commodity in the industry, and various business forums and summits were vying for me to be a keynote speaker. I was no longer the overlooked Samantha, no longer the middle daughter who just read books in a corner. I was the respected Samantha Jones, a successful entrepreneur known for her strong will and extraordinary courage. Sometimes, when I walk on the street, people recognize me and give me looks of admiration or curiosity. My name was no longer just Jason's sister or Lillian's sister. It had its own weight, its own light. I felt a sense of freedom and control I had never felt before, and that feeling was more satisfying than any amount of money. I had finally become my true self. And what about the people who once looked down on me? They got what they deserved, of course. Jason and Chloe's marriage fell apart in less than 6 months after the wedding. That farcical wedding was the epitaph for their marriage. Chloe's family, the once unassailable Glory Industries, lost its chance to turn things around after losing the partnership with Spark Innovations. The stock price plummeted, and they were buried in debt. Eventually, Glory Industries went bankrupt and was liquidated, its former glory a thing of the past. Chloe's family lost their high society status and, in one night, had nothing. Chloe's parents blamed Jason for everything. They believed he was the one who had provoked me, leading to their family's downfall. They accused him of being incompetent, unable to even handle his own sister, let alone revive a business. Chloe also couldn't handle the huge change. Her dream of a life of luxury had collapsed in an instant. She went from a spoiled rich girl to an ordinary person with nothing, even having to worry about making a living. She couldn't accept this change. The resentment and despair eventually crushed the fragile relationship she had with Jason. They divorced with no grace, only endless accusations and bitterness. I heard Jason later got a regular job at a small company. The former golden boy, the family's pride who had been given so much hope, was now just a normal employee, working a 9-to-5 for a few $1,000s a month. He had lost all his former glory and arrogance. He had been so high up and was now at rock bottom, experiencing the coldness of the world. And Chloe? She was living a life she never would have imagined. No designer bags, no lavish dinners, and even her credit cards were maxed out. I heard she later got a job working at a coffee shop, wearing a simple uniform and serving coffee to others every day. She once scoffed at me for being unrefined, and now she was the ordinary person she had once scorned. All the so-called friends who had flattered her had scattered after her family went bankrupt. They had been so high and mighty, so arrogant, but now they had fallen into the dust and had nothing. This is karma. They had planted the seeds themselves, and now they had to taste the bitter fruit. I never reached out to my family again. My parents would occasionally send me a text on a holiday, their tones clearly fawning and cautious, completely different from the people I had known. But I would just reply with a polite thanks or best wishes. I no longer craved their attention and love like I did when I was a child because I knew that love was conditional and that attention was fleeting. They once asked me what I wanted, and I said nothing. Because I already had the most important things, my freedom, my dignity, my career, and the ability to control my own life. They had forever lost the unconditional love and support of the daughter who had once quietly sacrificed for them without a single complaint. They put me in the kitchen, thinking they could humiliate me and forever exclude me from their circle of important guests. They thought that little table was my pillar of shame. But they were wrong. Terribly wrong. That little table wasn't my pillar of shame, it was my stage. It became the stage where I tore up their future, the starting point from which I announced to the world that I wasn't a victim, I was a master. Their future wasn't destroyed by me, it was buried by their own arrogance and disrespect. I was just the one who helped them raise the curtain. Now, I stand in my own world, basking in the sun and breathing the air of freedom. I am no longer the Samantha who lived in other people's eyes. I am my own person. And this is my true new beginning.